President Bola Tinubu says freedom of expression must be strengthened, not sabotaged. Nigeria's democracy, urging editors to wield their influence with fairness and national responsibility. Speaking at the 21st All Nigeria Editors Conference, he promised to act on calls for stronger protection of press freedom. But media leaders warn that democracy itself is at risk, as many newsrooms struggle to survive under rising costs. State House correspondent Adesuwa Omoran reports.
It was the first of its kind. Over 400 editors inside the presidential villa, face to face with the country's leader. The theme was bold: democratic governance and national cohesion, the role of editors ahead of the 2027 elections. After months of economic pressure and newsroom closures, editors came not to beg, but to insist that journalism must survive if democracy is to endure.
A free, responsible, and vibrant press remains the lifeblood of any democracy. When the press thrives, democracy breathes. When the press is stifled, democracy suffocates.
The Guild laid out concrete demands, including corporate tax relief, repeal of laws that inhibit press freedoms, VAT exemptions on media inputs, tax credits to encourage advertising, low-interest loans, and a media development fund to speed digital transition. For them, it's not sympathy, but survival. Then came the keynote that flipped the conversation. Imo State Governor Hope Uzodinma turned the challenge back on the journalists, saying editors themselves will shape whether 2027 becomes a test or a triumph for democracy.
You are not spectators in 2027. You are active participants. You are catalysts and facilitators. Whether you acknowledge it or not, the narratives you shape between now and the election will determine whether Nigerians approach 2027 with hope or cynicism, with trust or suspicion, with a sense of shared stake or through a tribal lens. I'm not asking you to become a propagandist for the state. I'm rather asking you to become custodians of information integrity, which sits well with electoral integrity.
He warns that sensational headlines have deepened public distrust and urges editors to rebuild credibility before voters return to the polls. Other speakers agree truth, not clicks, must drive coverage of Nigeria's democracy.
The government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has demonstrated its faith in you through his actions, not just his words. We invite you, therefore, to engage, to critique constructively, and to report with utmost responsibility that demands your participation at this moment of our history. The best editor is the one that knows what not to report.
President Tinubu acknowledges the media's historic role in defending democracy from colonial times to military rule, but urges the nation's editors to wield that freedom responsibly. He is warning against narratives that undermine national cohesion and confidence in the nation.
A democracy is sustained not only by elections and laws, but also by the integrity of the public conversation. This is where your role becomes central and indispensable as last man standing. I urge you, therefore, to continue upholding the highest standard of journalism. Report boldly, but do so truthfully. Criticize government policy, but do so with knowledge and fairness. Your aim must never be to tear down what we are building together, but to help build a better society.
Beyond the speeches, the conference went into technical sessions on electoral disputes, judicial integrity, and how the media can reinforce trust in Nigeria's democracy before 2027. This historic engagement is proof the government and media can disagree without hostility. even as the president promises to study the editor's proposals from VAT relief to reform of restrictive laws. Adesoa Omoran, Arise News.
Still staying on the Nigerian Guild of Editors Conference, editors and publishers have a crucial role in safeguarding Nigeria's hard-won economic stability of the past 2 years. This is according to Prince Nduka Obaigbena, co-chairman of the conference. He urged for a coalition of willing minds to safeguard reforms, tackle insecurity, and strengthen the country against proposed U.S. sanctions.
Head of State General Sani Abacha, as we sat in one of the conference rooms of the FEC, the soldiers walked to us and said to us, Ken Saro-Wiwa has just been executed. That was 30 years ago under military dictatorship. So 30 years after, we are here celebrating engagement with the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So I thought we must understand why democracy matters, why we must engage, why we must sustain democracy for the greater good of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. There are 3 leaders who were media owners who had had the fortune of leading Nigeria one way or the other. The first was Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, who was the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, head of state without being head of government. The second is Chief Obafemi Awolowo, who was leader of opposition and later deputy chairman of the Federal Executive Council under Gowon. The third is President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who is both leader of government and head of state. So we've had the fortune of having a media owner as head of state. Therefore, hosting us today is an advancement of that. Therefore, it means we have to engage, we have to discuss, and we have to understand ourselves. We are at the crossroad of reforms, which has been hard and hard fought. And now we stand on the gates of stability. We must protect that economic stability with everything we have. Because if we lose the current stability, we lose the sacrifices of the last 2 years. It therefore means that collectively, we cannot allow a US sanction. Because a US sanction will destabilize the economy and bring us all back to the time before the reforms. What does that mean? It means we must engage. It means we must build a coalition of the willing to defeat terrorism and insecurity and defeat poverty.
Also, the chairman of This Day and Arise Media Group, Prince Nduka Obaigbena, is raising the alarm that Nigeria risks losing its voice in the global media space amid the growing influence of artificial intelligence and foreign control of digital content on social media. He announced the launch of Lelekela, a new media platform aimed at challenging US and Chinese dominance in content distribution.
As editors, that is our key role in ensuring stability. Having said that, where do editors belong today? We are in the age of AI. It means your whole financial model of having the algorithms of Google leading to searches for all of us, maybe leading to monetization of content, is changing. AI is changing the format of Google and the format of the search engine. And it's going to change how journalism is run. And therefore, as Africans, we are confronted by a world where one or two countries controls distribution. That is, distribution of content through social media. It's controlled principally by the US and controlled to an extent by China. So that is the future of the information age we are birthing into. What are we doing about it? How are we responding to it? At the Disney and Arise Media Group, we have launched our own channel, our own social media channel, to be released in January called Lelekela. And that will shape the future and challenge the dominance of the US and China. But all of us have a responsibility to watch the AI-dominated future and build technology and algorithms that will affect how media is distributed and how content is earned. So as we gather here today, I think we should celebrate democracy, and we should celebrate Nigeria, and we should work together for the sake of Nigeria. So as we celebrate free speech and Nigeria, I want all of us to give a round of applause to Nigeria, Nigeria, Nigeria.
On to other stories. The National Assembly has approved President Bola Tinubu to borrow the sum of 1.15 trillion naira from the domestic debt market to fund the deficits in the 2025 national budget. Both chambers gave the approval after careful consideration of reports from their committees on local and foreign debt. The 2025 Appropriation Act passed by the National Assembly stands at 59.99 trillion naira, representing an increase of 5.25 trillion naira above the 54.74 trillion naira earlier proposed by the executive, thereby creating a budget deficit of 14.10 trillion naira, out of which only 12.95 trillion naira had been approved for borrowing, leaving an unfunded gap of 1.15 trillion naira. To bridge the gap, the National Assembly approved that the federal government raise the sum of 1.15 trillion naira through the domestic debt market, noting that such borrowing should be undertaken strictly within approved fiscal parameters. It further stressed the need for the Federal Ministry of Finance and the Debt Management Office, DMO, to ensure that all borrowing terms are favorable, transparent, and sustainable.
Consider the report of the Committee on Loans, on AIDS, Loans and Debt Management on the request for the approval of the total sum of 1,150 billion naira, only being the borrowing plan program in the domestic debt market to close the unfunded 2025 budget deficit gap, and approve the recommendation of the report.
The committee recommends, one, that the Senate do approve Mr. President's request to establish a 1 trillion naira, 150 billion naira borrowing program in the domestic debt market to close the unfunded deficit gap created by the increase in the budget size over and above the prior approved revenue and borrowing plans.
Right. We have a number of stories here. Of course, primarily the focus is on the Editors Conference, All Nigeria Editors Conference. First day happened yesterday, hosted by the President at the State House, as we saw the co-chair, Prince Nduka Obaigben, and the co-chair was also the Sultan of Sokoto of that conference. Again, welcome back, Dr. Abati. You're looking quite dapper. Is this the 60-year-old look, I must ask?
No, it's my wife that said I should dress like
Thank you so much for celebrating with us today, your first day back. We've missed your analysis on the table, and we're glad to have you back on such a day as this, where you are a member of the Guild of Editors, a fellow actually of the Guild of Editors. So it'd be great to get your perspective.
In honor of Dr. Just Doctor, you can have the floor.
Okay, Dr. Wati, go ahead, please.
Okay, it's the 21st edition of the All Nigerian Editors Conference, and I think it's a good thing to start with that the opening ceremony was hosted personally by the President. The Honorable Minister of Information, Mohammed Idris, Minister Idris, pointed out that this is the first time that a sitting president will attend the opening ceremony of an editors conference. Prince Nduka Obaigben pointed out that, it's not just about, attending the opening ceremony. We have, as president, as head of government and head of state, an active player within the media space himself, as a publisher, in all the various forms of media practice. So you may say that the president was playing host to a constituency in which he himself is a major player. But I would just like to run through most of the statements. The theme is about democracy and how to enhance democratic governance and the role of editors. The president started by acknowledging the fact that journalists are very important partners in nation building, a statement that was further echoed by Minister Idris, and that government sees journalists as partners, as nation builders, and that it's important that the media continues to support the government of the day with fairness and patriotism. And he made a point about responsible journalism, which is a famous subject in media studies. Francis S. Merrill talks about responsible journalism as defined by the president. He says, yes, you can criticize, but do so with fairness and objectivity. And he made a number of points. He talked about fairness. He talked about the importance of knowledge. He talked about balance. He talks about verification of facts before taking a position. And he described the media as a major instrument for national cohesion, for national unity. He says dissent is welcome, debate is welcome, and that all that journalists need to do is to ensure that responsible journalism. And he used the opportunity to talk about his programs. He said when he removed the fuel subsidy, when he removed the arbitrage, people were very critical, but that those reform moves have ensured stability within the economy, and that members of the fourth estate of the realm, as the minister later properly defined us, have a responsibility to continue to act in this regard. Well, you may say that, well, is it in the place of the president, even as a media owner or newspaper publisher, to be teaching journalists how to do their job? But he admitted that there is the issue of terrorism, there's the issue of banditry, but that, his government is committed to continuing to serve the Nigerian people. Now, the other major issue was the statement by both the minister, Minister Idris, and also Governor Hope Uzodinma of Imo State. Both of them just saying, look, journalists are not bystanders. They are not spectators. They are active participants in the nation-building process, and which is the truth. Anyway, since 1859, Nigerian journalists have been in this environment with the publication of the first newspaper in Nigeria, Iwe Iroyin, by Henry Townsend, in no less a place than that very important city of Abeokuta in 1859. And that tradition has been sustained. And as Fred Iomu has argued in his book on the history of the Nigerian press, this is a very courageous media, a crusading media, that we have had in Nigeria. So to remind the Nigerian media of that heritage, I think it's also an appropriate thing to do. But Prince Nduka Obagbena, who was co-chairman, or is co-chairman of the ongoing conference, now made a point about the future, which is the thing that we talk about all the time. He says artificial intelligence is the future. Algorithms will change. And what will happen is that with this increased digitalization and the democratization of technology and the emergence of new creative and adaptive tools within the media space, it's going to change how content is created. It's going to change skills in the workplace. In fact, it's going to, if I may add, generate new creativity. In fact, it may lead even to job displacement. Because in some countries now, you see AI figures reading the news. A time may well come when they will not need anchors to come and read news because of the adaptability of technology. So Prince Nduka Obagbena was saying, at Arise News here, we are ready because by January, the company will take steps, to get more into that digital space. And it's like he's telling, other participants at that conference that, look, the time to start is now because the future is not tomorrow. It is now. It is already here. And I think that was also a very important message to put out there in that audience. Well, the thing about AI is that, there will be new creativity, there will be new forms, and it's not just about content. There will be need for new skills. That's the subtext of what Prince Obagbena was also saying. Because if you want to work in that media of the future, maybe old skills may become inadequate. Maybe we ourselves here will probably have to learn new skills.
Absolutely.
Technology may do most of our work for us. Then to go to the president, my president, Eze Anaba, who is the president of the KIL. He drew attention to yet another important point, the condition of the media. I once wrote a piece, Faculty of Bizadmi, Obafemi Awolowo University, many years back, where I was talking about how you can manage the media in a dispossessed economy. If the media was dispossessed about a decade or more ago, about 20 years ago, when I gave that lecture. Now, this economy is even more dispossessed now. And that was the truth that the president of the guild was putting across. Namely, that many media houses cannot pay salaries. Many people cannot buy newspapers. The traditional media is threatened by these small phones that people carry. Everybody now has become a journalist. I think the president also pointed that out. Everybody is a publisher. Even if it is one, I better pass my neighbor phone that they are carrying about. They take pictures. They do everything. So the way of creating content, as Prince Obagbena pointed out, has changed. But the traditional media and the media generally still has to be supported. And this is a point when the president was calling for media intervention fund, when he was calling for tax release, when he was calling for tax credits for people who advertise in the media, so that this profession of journalism can be sustained in this environment. And I commend to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, apart from thanking him for hosting our community, the words of Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States, who has said and did a lot for the promotion of free press. He was the one who said in 1787 that, look, if I were to choose between government without newspapers or newspapers without government, I would choose the latter. In other words, you would rather have a free press than have a government that is breathing down the neck of the people. So the whole point about partnership that was made at that opening ceremony is about responsibility on both parts. On the part of government to provide a thriving, enabling environment for the practice of journalism in this country, and also on the part of journalists to follow those basic tenets identified by the president, that these are ethical codes that are central in all the code of ethics documents, whether it's the Guild of Editors or the Nigerian Union of Journalists or the Broadcasting Organization of Nigeria.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Bati.
Good. Happy 60th today.
All cylinders, you
Firing.
what it was a test to check if a 6-year-old is still there, but he's still there. You got it. And it's even more fiery. Thank you so much. You got it.
You got it.
Rufai, your take on this story.
So, a couple of things. I'm happy about this speech about democracy and the fact that the media plays a very important role, and the kind words of President Tinubu. And President Tinubu strikes a very good chord when he says there must be verification in our job. You can criticize government, but you must also be fair and balanced, which we believe. But you see, the problem I have with that narrative is that it's easier said than done by President Tinubu. My number is deliberately made public for a reason. I got a call from a strange number recently, and it's been a journalist that was arrested for publishing a story where he had his facts. I had to intervene. I cannot count how many journalists that the state has taken into custody because of the stories they've written. But because the stories contravene some interests, and it's happening under President Tinubu's administration, even being a media publisher himself. I had criticized the government borrowing plan, and a government spokesperson called me an economic illiterate, when the facts are there that this government has borrowed so much. The numbers as at the last DMO release is over 150 trillion. That number is still going to increase. Add this over 1 trillion that the Senate is just approving. And you also know that there were other, maybe a 1 billion or 2 billion thereabout, that they also were asking for the World Bank. Next year alone, they're going to look for another 150 million to be able to fill the vaccination gap, because we're not getting as much aid from the Western nations and the likes. But this same administration promised that part of the pikes of subsidy removal was the fact that the borrow was going to lessen. Just try to compare and contrast how much we borrowed when we were paying subsidies under Goodluck Jonathan than how much we're borrowing today. We have an humongous size of budget. About 59 trillion we're here now. How have they been able to fund the budget? When you demand accountability, the same government pushes back. Till today, I challenge the same government to tell us the budget performance of the multiple concurrent budget cycles they are running. When the president gave his presidential presentation of the budget, the president said one budget performance, the Speaker of the Senate, the President of the Senate said another budget performance. We want to collaborate, but when the government sees a media that does its job, they make the media an enemy. That's where Alexander Shutnitsky said his famous words. If you remember the book, The Gulag Archipelago. He said, no government likes a good writer, because any good writer is like another government. So that contrast is there. So we can say all the nice things. But when the criticism comes, how do they take it? Except government starts to see that even what they call adversarial media is in their own best interest, because it is your critics that will tell you what your sycophants cannot tell you. And these governments must understand that. Your sycophants are less in your journey of success than what your critics will do. So, if we want to keep sycophants around, you can continue that. Is it not the platitudes and the flowery words? But if you want critics that will tell you that, yes, you have made reforms, yes, things are turning corner, but the pain of the reform is still there. And it's not reflecting on the economic cycle. The United Nations recently said that when you look at it, Nigeria is tipping into the hunger threshold, mentioned with countries like Afghanistan and the likes. As regards what my lovely boss, Prince Nduka Igbana said, and he's a man ahead of his time. When Prince Nduka Igbana was reforming the newsroom, buying computers in the early 90s, a lot of people thought he was joking. He saw the future ahead of them. Today, with Lelekela, he has also seen the future. God gave that man eyes to see the future. He's a visionary. That's why most of the innovations in media today is done by that man, Prince Nduka Igbana. I'm not saying it because he's my boss. I'm saying because it's a fact. What Prince Ndukau Baegbana is saying is that the new editors of the future will be algorithms. That's why he's launching Lelekela. Because when you look at the historical antecedents of media, verticals change due to scientific evolution. In the 1500s, until the Gutenberg press started with Johannes Gutenberg, we didn't have mass duplication of printing presses. After that happened, then Guglielmo Marconi transferred Atlantic waves and he started the radio. That's why when Guglielmo Marconi died, what happened? All radio stations shut down in the world to give him 1 minute silence. Then in 1920s, Jean Longuibird, the Scottish investor, I remember then it was said in the story that when he took his new invention of a television set to a newspaper outlet, a lot of people laughed at him, but they didn't know it was the future. The 60s, 70s, John Longuebird's innovation, we started talking about the revolution will be televised. Then Tim Berners-Lee started the new vertical of the internet with CERN in the late 80s into the early 90s. And that's what we're using. Then we have also now disrupted that vertical into AI, artificial intelligence. And there's going to be many more disruptions with social networking and the likes. What Prince Ndukau Baegbana is just saying is, I have seen the future, come ahead, Leke.
All right, I love that. He said artificial intelligence will become the editor of the future, and yes. I think that's quite instructive. But yesterday, first of all, let me say congratulations to the Guild of Editors with the president, Eze Anaba. He was at Dr. Abati's celebration last week. Had the opportunity to see him there. But I think even beyond that would be, the fact that they've been able to have, for the first time since the editors, the Guild of Editors have had this conference where a sitting president is present. And of course, no surprises there to a very large extent because the president himself is a media owner, so it's his constituency, if you can say that. But in his speech, he had spoken about, and let me just quote him, where he said that verification must be your anchor, balance must be your principle, for journalists and media personnel to criticize government policy, but do so with knowledge and fairness. Let your aim be to build, not destroy. I want to believe that the aim of media as the fourth estate of the realm is very critical when we talk about strengthening democracy. They are the link between the government and the people, the electorate, and they also play a public watchdog role, if I can put it that way. They have a key responsibility to ensure that electorates are informed, empowered, engaged throughout the political process. And so that's why it's important for us when we speak about a thriving democracy to ensure that the voice of the press, the voice of media is powerful. And that's why in Nigeria it is constitutionally backed as well for the role of the press in democracy as the fourth estate of the realm. Now, when we talk about nation building and ensuring fairness and objectivity in reporting so as not to disrupt national unity, there's an important not to cross the line of propaganda in terms of when you say, okay, let's report, let's make it objective, be fair, let's not say things that will inflame or in the process or will go against nation building and national unity. Yes, that's well said. But it's important that in the government pursuing this narrative to ensure that they're not also stifling the voice of the media, which is powerful as a tool for checkmating and acting as a watchdog for the public to ensure that the voice is not silenced. I think it's important that we don't cross that line because this was said by the president, echoed by the Minister of Information, also reiterated by the governor of Imo State during his speech as the keynote speaker. It's important that we're able to differentiate what fair, objective, informed, verified reporting of the facts is, and that of propaganda where there's a resistance to dissenting voices or anything that is said or written that doesn't agree with the government of the day is said to be not patriotic, not nation building, not in the spirit of national unity. I think it's very important. But in fairness to this administration as a whole, when it comes to media freedom or press freedom, some people might say they've done quite well compared to predecessors. At least we've come a very long way from the military era. However, it's also important to not use legal route to stifle the voice of the press. And I say this highlighting the social media bill, which has been contentious, with some provisions of the bill almost bordering on stifling the voice of the media. And so I think the best gift the president can give to editors and the media profession as a whole in Nigeria is to ensure that he's able to uphold the voice of the media so that they can keep the government and its administration accountable, especially because the other arms of government which are supposed to play this role, and I talk about the judiciary and the legislature, have come under a lot of criticism for not being able to step into their role as holding and checkmating the executive arm of government. And that's why more than ever, the voice of the media is powerful. I do agree with the theme around cohesion and working together collaboratively to ensure that we're able to build a thriving democracy. Absolutely true. And so let the government help the media by ensuring that we have good things to report in the news. Our job is to report the facts. Can the government ensure that they do the work so that what we report is true, fair, and it's also in the interest of nation building? Now, going on to Lelekela, one of the things about Prince Ndukka Obagbena that he has consistently said, he's been a consistent advocate of, is Africa telling the story of Africa from an African perspective. Now, when we look at the future and AI and the significant role that AI is going to play when it comes to dissemination of information to the global world in the nearest future, we must look at Africa, Nigeria in this instance, being able to own its own narrative. Because if you look at it, do a simple search with the AI tools available, a simple search, you will find out that the search results you get are skewed towards Western narrative. And it's because it's data in, data out. It's what is being fed in that comes out. And so until Nigeria, Africa, takes its own place in the global information system in terms of dissemination and creation of content, we will continue to have the narrative skewed and the voice of Africa being spoken, or the story of Africa being spoken from a Western perspective. And this is why Lelekela is a welcome development. And I hope that it also acts as an opportunity to inspire other media players, media entrepreneurs to see the future and begin to work, especially in line with AI. So we look forward to how Lelekela will come on board and be the game changer, just as we have seen in the evolution of media in Nigeria since that Dr. Abati highlighted from the 19th century when Iwe Iroyin was launched.